Welcome back to Face the Nation. One of the lawmakers who worked on that bipartisan agreement aimed at boosting the nation's infrastructure was Senator Jon Tester. He joins us from Big Sandy, Montana. Good morning, Senator.
Good to be with you, John.
So before we get into the chopping up of the politics here, can we step back for a second? You were involved in a bipartisan agreement. What does bipartisanship look like in today's politics?
Well, it was, in this case, 5 Democrats and 5 Republicans that sat down and compromised and gave a little, and I think ended up with a package that makes sense for the American public, and that it creates infrastructure, creates jobs, supports businesses, and is historic in nature. And we argued, we fought, we debated, and in the end, we all agreed, all 10 of us agreed on every provision in this bill. And I think the result of that is people setting their differences aside and working together and helping build this country. Just as my ancestors did, we did it in that room. And now we've got another tough job, and that's getting enough votes on both sides of the aisle to get this through the process and get it to the president's desk.
Let me talk about that other tough job, because good ideas can not get anywhere if they don't get the votes. So let's start with the Republican side. You had 5 Republicans. You'll need 5 more if you hold every Democrat to get it through the Senate. How possible do you think that is? There was some heartburn when the president connected the bills together. A, is that heartburn gone among the ones who were working with you? And B, what do you think the chances are getting at least 5 more Republicans?
Look, John, I think that possibility is going to be great. I think we're going to get a lot more than 5 more Republicans. And I think we're also going to see bumps in the road as this goes through the process. Every week there's probably going to be another problem that arises. We'll work through those problems just like we work through them in our gang of 10 folks. And I think we'll get good support from both sides of the aisle. I think we'll get far more than 60 votes in the end to get this through the Senate.
And on the Democratic side, there are a number of Democratic senators who said if it doesn't include the environmental provisions that are originally a part of the president's package, they're not going to vote for it. Do you think that is the kind of line in the sand people draw during these things, and then in the end they vote with you? Or do you think that this could be something that loses some Democratic senators on the way to passage?
Time will tell on that, John. I think this package does have some environmental programs to it, environmental policies to it. Whether it's enough to satisfy the folks who are advocating for more and more things to be done in the environment, which, by the way, I don't think is something that is wrong either. It's just this is where we ended up at. And look, when we do a reconciliation package, depending on what that package looks like, it certainly could have some additional environmental parts to it.
Let me talk to you about that reconciliation package. This would be a big spending bill that would pass with Democratic votes only, presumably. A portion of that bill would likely be the president's clean electricity standard. As we talked about it, some of your colleagues, Senator Smith of Minnesota, has said she won't vote for a reconciliation package unless it has that standard, which seeks to decarbonize the electricity by 2030, the electric grid. You come from a state with a lot of coal production. Would you support the president's clean energy standard in a reconciliation bill that Senator Smith says is necessary to vote for it?
Well, look, I do come from a state that has a lot of coal, a lot of natural gas, a lot of oil, and I also come from a state right now that is under severe drought. And so I think we need to make common sense steps forward to deal with climate. And there has to be a transition. Anybody will tell you that. You just can't shut off the spigot. You have to move forward in a common sense way so this economy continue to grow, but also deal with the climate issues. So, that will be in the details, John. We'll take a look at it when it comes up. And if it is something that I can't live with, then we'll try to massage it through the process that we go through in reconciliation to amend and make it so it's something that the whole country can live with and actually expand our economy with it.
I want to ask you, as a farmer, and you mentioned the heat, Montana's seen 100-year records in the last month. Half the population is in drought areas. In California, it's just crippling the farmers, the drought. do you think that will lead to inflation on products that farmers produce in Montana? And then secondly, can farmers adapt in a climate that keeps getting hotter?
Well, we have been adapting in a climate that has been getting hotter. This has been going on for decades. I've been on this farm, which is a farm my grandparents homesteaded. This will be our 44th harvest for Charlotte and I. This will probably be the worst harvest we've ever cut because of the drought. But farmers continue to adapt. They continue to change. But one thing is for certain. The climate is very volatile now, more volatile than it's ever been since I took over the farm. And we do have to do some things and encourage other countries to do things to move us in the right direction on climate. If we don't, I think some of the things you're talking about food prices going up and possibly even food not having enough becomes real. And not only for the United States, but for the entire world. So we've got a lot of work to do here, John. We need to do it in a bipartisan way. We need to stop the fear mongering around climate change and start doing things that work for this country.
All right, Senator Tester, thank you so much for being with us this morning. We look forward to having you back again, and we'll be right back in a moment. One of the states with the lowest vaccination rates in the country is Arkansas. Hospital admissions in the state are up 30% in the last week. Joining us from Little Rock is Governor Asa Hutchinson. Good morning, Governor.
Good morning, John. Good to be with you.
Thank you for being with us. The University of Arkansas Medical Sciences had to reopen its COVID wing, and the CEO there said, "We have seen a 300% increase in the numbers of patients hospitalized." What's going on?
Well, those that are being hospitalized are those that have not been vaccinated. And what you see in Arkansas, and that probably replicates some of what you see across the country, is that in March and April, whenever we were struggling with vaccine supplies, we started getting our vaccines out there. You saw our cases go down dramatically. And when our cases went down, the demand for vaccines was reduced as well. And so what you have is that people started feeling comfortable. People saw the cases, the hospitalizations down, and so the urgency of getting the vaccine slowed down. We've got to make sure that we do everything we can to get the word out, which we have. We've used incentives that have not been very successful. We've obviously done marketing for our vaccines. We're educating, doing everything that we can. And we're up to, 50% of adults already are vaccinated, but we've got to get that higher. We're doing everything we can to encourage that. And I think if incentives don't work, reality will. And as you see the hospitalizations go up, the cases go up, I think you'll see the vaccination rate increase as well.
Help us think through some of this, because is it just the lack of urgency? Because reality has been pretty apparent for the last, more than a year and a half. So is there some other portion of this hesitancy that is tougher to crack than just simply the fact that it's not blaring from the headlines every day?
Absolutely. I mean, there is vaccine hesitancy. Part of it is we'll just delay it, but the part that you're most concerned about are those that don't believe in the efficacy of it. They believe in the conspiracy theories. I had emails today from a business person who was discouraging vaccines, and part of it is just the nature of humans, that unless they are absolutely convinced, there is that vaccine hesitancy. One of the challenges was the fact that this is under FDA emergency use authorization, and so we need to get that research completed so it can be final approval. I think that will help. Secondly, you look back, and I think the pause on the J&J vaccine increased the hesitancy. I think that was an error. I don't think it was necessary, but those factors together, I think, increased the hesitancy.
Explain to me why the change in the FDA emergency use authorization would make it easier to get people vaccinated.
Well, whenever they see emergency use authorization, then they say, well, they haven't made a final approval. They haven't got all the research completed that is needed on there. They want to do more study. And so it was approved as emergency use. And so for that reason, you can't mandate it. We don't mandate it in Arkansas. We have to rely upon the education. And part of that is, even though there is a minor level of risk with the vaccine, the risk is so much greater if you get COVID. And that's what we're seeing now. One person that I am familiar with in terms of the story, they mocked the vaccine. They ultimately got COVID. They're on a respirator now, and their life is in jeopardy. That's what we've got to continue to educate and realize lives are at stake to encourage the vaccine taking.
Do you have to make a policy choice? I know you've said you don't want to shut things down, but if these numbers keep getting worse, do you have to think about anything, I don't know, mask mandates, anything to protect people from this portion of the population that is so resistant?
Well, theoretically, that could be on the table, but in reality, we're beyond that. We know what we need to do. And I don't believe, even with the increase that we've seen in hospitalizations, that we're going to go back to the levels we were last winter. But it is a concern, but I don't believe that you're going to go back to the heavy government restrictions that we had at the outset of this pandemic. People know what to do. They're instructed in it, and we're having to count upon their individual responsibility to do the right thing. We're hoping they will get there.
One more quick question on this. Trends experts say that this Delta variant plus the fall and winter, things are going to get worse. Do you have to start making preparations now in case there continues to be hesitancy and those predictions turn out to be true?
Well, the Delta variant is a great concern to us. We see that impacting our increasing cases and hospitalizations. And so, yes, you have to take the counsel of the medical experts seriously whenever they look at this coming winter. Although I don't think we're going to get there, we do have to have those contingency plans in place in the event we do see challenges coming this next winter.
I've got a quick question on infrastructure. It can seem like an abstract idea to people, but the I-40 bridge that went from Tennessee to Arkansas had to be shut down. Tell us how bad it got and how that's affected the economy in the area.
Well, it's been a terrible loss to our economy in terms of the increased cost of transportation, logistics. The I-40 bridge is a major artery. It is still shut down. And so it helps us to get our goods across the Mississippi River to the East Coast. We have commuters going back and forth. I think the Trucking Association says it costs us $2.4 million a day just in extra logistics cost. And so we want to get that fixed. And it illustrates the need for the current infrastructure plan. I applaud the senators that came together in a bipartisan way. From a governor's standpoint, that helps us get to these kind of bridge repairs. It helps us to improve our road and bridge infrastructure, but also our electric vehicle modernization and having those systems in place. The water systems are important, our Arkansas River navigation. So I hope they get to the next step and get that passed.
All right, Governor Hutchinson, thanks so much for being with us, and we'll be back in a moment. We go now to former FDA Commissioner Dr. Scott Gottlieb, who is also on the board of Pfizer. Good morning, Dr. Gottlieb.
Good morning.
Let's start with this Delta variant. Great Britain has a better handle because they've had to face more of it. It kind of looks like what things might be like in the United States after a little while. What have we learned from the UK about the Delta variant, and what might that tell us about its actions here?
Yeah, I think we're probably about a month or two behind the UK in terms of their experience with the variant. They're seeing cases grow there. It's certainly not taking off with the same velocity that we've seen in past epidemics. And the other thing that we're observing about the UK experience right now is it's not having the same impact. So they've had about 90,000 cases. They've had about 1,000 hospitalizations. The vast majority are in people who are unvaccinated. Only 8% of people who've been fully vaccinated are among the hospitalized patients. And so you have a situation where you have a population that has more immunity in it, not just through vaccination, but also through prior infection. So it's not having the same impact in terms of causing severe death and disease as it was during the last epidemic. So even the case fatality rate is down substantially. It's about 0.1 to 0.3%, depending on how you measure it. The experience in the U.S. is likely to be similar. We have a population that also has a lot of immunity in it through both vaccination and prior infection, but there are social compartments in the U.S., both geographic and social compartments, where you have under-vaccination and you don't have a lot of immunity in the population. It's particularly rural parts in the South particularly. You're seeing what's happening in Missouri right now, where about 60% of the infections are the Delta variant. And so that's a reflection of the fact that you have parts of the United States where we don't have a lot of vaccination, and we also don't have a lot of prior infection, and those are going to be the more vulnerable parts of this country.
So we had, over the course of the last year and a half, become used to hearing about spikes. This, then, what you're saying is not going to be a spike of the kind we're used to, but in certain communities, there are these upticks. What do they need to know in those communities?
I think that's right. It's not going to be as pervasive. We're going to see pockets of the country. It's going to be hyper-regionalized, where there's certain pockets of the country where you can have very dense outbreaks. And if you remember back in the fall, when we had that epidemic in the Midwest that really started the national epidemic, it occurred in states like Wisconsin. Wisconsin lit up first. If you looked at what was happening there, it was in rural communities where you saw the very dense outbreak, and then it started to spread out from there. I think as you look across the United States, if you're a community that has low vaccination rates, and you also think that there's low immunity from prior infection, so the virus really hasn't coursed through the local population, those communities are vulnerable. So I think governors need to be thinking about how they build out healthcare resources in areas of the country where you still have a lot of vulnerability.
We talked to Governor Hutchinson of Arkansas, and he was saying that people don't feel a sense of urgency because of the success, oddly, of the vaccination and the fact that it's not on the front page. That keeps them from getting vaccinated because they don't think it's a big deal. Would you just kind of outline the benefits of vaccination and the dangers of not getting vaccinated that go beyond just the health of the individual who may make that personal choice for themselves?
Right. Well, there's certainly the benefits of vaccination in terms of just avoiding disease, and we know that this can be a severe disease. We also know that there's more long-term sequelae from having COVID. There's more long-term consequences. There was a study out of Norway just recently that looked at people who recovered from COVID, and it found that at 6 months, about 60% of people reported persistent symptoms. 37% reported problems with fatigue. 24% reported problems with memory. And what was startling about this study is it also showed that in younger populations, in people 16 to 30 years old, about 50% also reported persistent symptoms. And in fact, the loss of taste and smell was most persistent in the younger population. So COVID isn't just an immediate illness. It's having sustained consequences. And then there's also the benefit to the community. If you're someone who's younger and healthier and you're not at risk from COVID or from a bad outcome from COVID, you feel like you're more impervious to the disease, there's nonetheless a lot of consequences to you being a chain in transmission, spreading the disease to others. If you get vaccinated, we know you're substantially less likely to spread the disease to those around you. So if you have young children at home or you're interacting with older individuals who may not get all the benefits from vaccination, or people who are immunocompromised, if you vaccinate yourself, you're far less likely to become asymptomatic or mildly symptomatic from the infection and go on to infect others. So there is that community aspect to getting vaccinated and protecting those you care about who are around you.
In our previous discussions, you've talked about having to change the way in which vaccines are delivered, that officials have to come up with more clever and interesting ways. I wonder in that context what you think of the New York effort that the mayor there is going to have at-home vaccinations. Do you think does that make some sense? And might that be a way to pierce some of this hesitancy?
Yeah, I think it's exactly what we need to be doing. We need to be thinking about more bespoke ways to deliver the vaccine. We also need to move away from sort of a top-down national campaign to get people vaccinated and make more of a grassroots campaign, empower local leaders, local physicians to try to help reach out into their communities to get people vaccinated. People who are going to be convinced to get vaccinated by Tony Fauci or the Surgeon General, or me for that matter, probably are already vaccinated. And so we need to get into the vaccines into the hands of doctors, make it easier for doctors to supply vaccines in their offices, and both companies are trying to come up with formulations that will be easier to deliver in a doctor's office, including Pfizer, the company I'm on the board of. We need to empower doctors to be vaccinating and supply the resources to do that. There was a study out from the Commonwealth Foundation this week that showed of the people who remain unvaccinated, about 50% said they would be most convinced to become vaccinated from their local physicians, from their doctors. And so that's what we need to shift to. We need to shift to more of a grassroots, bottom-up campaign and move away from this top-down national campaign as we enter into the fall. There will be people seeking out vaccination heading into the fall as people contemplate going back to work and back to school. So I'm still optimistic we'll pick up more of the American population and get them vaccinated. But it's going to slow down as we get into the summer and prevalence declines and people feel safer.
We're going to have to leave it there, Dr. Gottlieb. As always, we listen to every word you say, and so we're grateful for you being here. Thanks so much, Dr. Gottlieb, and we'll be right back in a moment. Every Sunday, when I walk to this studio, I pass a firehouse. It is quiet that early in the morning. The firemen and women pass the time in easy conversation or preparing their equipment. It is nearly as peaceful as it was in the middle of the night Thursday at Champlain Tower South, just before the building collapsed. That nightmare, coming at the hour where we risk feeling safest, asleep in our beds, summoned police, emergency medical technicians, and firemen like the ones I pass on the way to work each Sunday. In an instant, that community of protection rushed to endanger their lives in the hope of saving the lives of others. Their heroism in falling rubble and live electrical wires gives hope in dark moments to the families and to the rest of us, staggered by what we see. It is all too big, and the anguish and the loss. Let me start that over if I may. Can I just start over at the all too big? Because I want to be covered. Morning walks by the firehouse, not because those moments are peaceful, but because even when the sirens are not blaring, those men and women are still dedicated every day to life's preciousness, to rescuing people they don't know simply because they are human. The rest of us may never face an acute moment of danger where we can be a hero, but we are all surrounded by humans every day to whom we can be generous, compassionate, and true. In these tragic moments, we feel our common human connection. We can honor those feelings by being like the first responders, who recognize that human connection even after the tragedy passes. And officials in Surfside, Florida have just announced that the death toll in that building collapse has risen. 9 have now been lost. Our prayers go out to those who've lost family or friends. Until next week, for Face the Nation, I'm John Dickerson.